Welcome to Dark Verse. I'm Isaac Nightshade, and tonight we step into the burning silence of the desert, where isolation warps reality and ancient horrors lie just beneath the sand. These are 9 very scary true desert horror stories, real encounters from the world's most unforgiving places, where the heat distorts more than just the air and every shadow might be watching. From ghostly hitchhikers to vanishing compounds, voices in sandstorms to cursed discoveries long buried, these tales aren't just unsettling, they're unforgettable. So dim the lights, silence the world, and prepare yourself, because once the desert whispers your name, it never forgets. Let's begin. Story number 1. I'm not here to prove anything. I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm only telling this because I need to get it out, and because I haven't slept through the night in months. This happened last October. I had just gone through a bad breakup and needed to reset. I've always been a bit of a loner, so I decided to take a solo camping trip through southern Utah, just skirting the Arizona border. I brought my gear, my dog Moose, a loyal German Shepherd Lab mix, and a few essentials. No plans, no timeline, just me, nature, and some peace. I had downloaded a bunch of maps offline, picked out some BLM land, and drove out as far as I could on a dirt trail that didn't even have a name. After a few miles of bouncing over rocks and dodging sagebrush, I found the perfect spot, flat, open, and miles from anything. The first 2 nights were perfect, quiet, chilly, and empty. I barely even saw wildlife, just the occasional hawk or coyote prints in the sand. Moose was calm, alert as always, but not anxious. We hiked by day and sat by the fire at night. On the 3rd morning, though, something strange happened. I found a radio. It was partially buried in the dirt, maybe 50 yards from my camp. It was old, looked military grade, like the kind you'd see in war documentaries. Heavy metal casing, olive drab with knobs and a long retractable antenna. There was no reason for it to be out there. No footprints around it, no tire tracks. It wasn't rusted, though the casing had scratches and dust all over. The weirdest part? It still worked. I brought it back to camp and turned the dial, expecting static, but the screen lit up, dim green letters glowing behind a cracked glass screen. At first, it only made a low static hum, like a whisper through gravel. Then the voices started, not clear ones, muffled, distant, like they were just out of range. I heard crackles, short bursts of something like request, north sector, and status unknown, static. It didn't feel like a radio show or a recording. It felt live. I sat with it for an hour, trying to decode what I was hearing. Some words repeated, Sector 4, copy, confirm. It was creepy, but I chalked it up to old military equipment picking up weird signals. Maybe old frequency loops bouncing through the desert somehow. I kept it on as background noise for the rest of the day. Moose didn't like it. He kept side-eyeing the thing and growling under his breath, tail stiff. That night, the temperature dropped fast. I bundled up in my sleeping bag with Moose curled beside me, the radio now turned off and sitting on a rock outside the tent. Around 2 a.m., I woke up. Moose was sitting upright, ears perked, growling low. I listened and heard it too, crackling. The radio had turned itself on. Through the tent walls, I could see the faint glow of the green screen. The same whispery static sound poured from it, but louder this time. Not just loud, urgent, like someone was trying to break through. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. The desert was freezing and dead silent, except for the crackle of that damn radio. The screen flickered wildly, like someone was changing frequencies rapidly. Then it stopped, and a voice came through. It wasn't military, it was a woman's voice. Clear, calm, but weirdly slow, like she was underwater. She said, "You shouldn't be here." That's it. Just that one sentence. Then the radio shut off completely. No flicker, no static. Dead. I stood there frozen for a long time, staring at the thing. My first thought was that someone was nearby, messing with me, but there was no one. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned in every direction. Flat, endless desert, No movement, no sounds. Moose stayed glued to my side, growling low. In the morning, I packed everything and decided to hike back to where I found the radio. I needed to see if there was anything else out there. Maybe someone was hiding out. Maybe it was part of some experiment. I didn't know, but I needed answers. The area where I'd found it looked the same, untouched. I walked in widening circles, looking for anything unusual. After maybe 20 minutes, Moose started barking. He'd wandered a little ahead, nose buried in a shallow pit. When I got there, I saw it. Bones. Old bones. Not human, but large. Maybe cow or horse. But they were arranged in a spiral. Not natural, like someone had taken the time to lay them out in a specific pattern. At the center of the spiral was another radio, identical to mine, but shattered, almost like it had been burned. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept the radio inside the tent with me, switched off. Moose wouldn't settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was walking outside the tent. No footsteps, just presence, the weight of being watched. At 3:17 a.m., the radio turned itself on again, but this time it wasn't a voice. It was a scream, high-pitched, constant, distorted, like metal being twisted inside a woman's throat. Moose lost it, barking like crazy. I slammed the off button, but it didn't stop. I ripped the batteries out, and only then did the noise die. We left at sunrise. I didn't pack up. I just grabbed Moose and got in the car. I left the tent, the radio, everything. I drove nonstop until I hit the nearest town with a motel and collapsed there. A few weeks later, I told a friend who's an amateur radio nerd about what happened. I didn't go into too much detail, just said I found an old military radio and heard weird stuff. His reaction froze me. You didn't try tuning to 147.735, did you? I hadn't, but I asked why that mattered. He said, that's a restricted frequency. They say it was used by experimental desert test sites back in the Cold War. Some kind of early warning network. But rumor is it got hijacked by something else. Something else. I haven't been back since. I still have nightmares, though. Sometimes I dream I'm back there, standing in that spiral of bones, surrounded by radios all screaming in unison. And in every dream, that woman's voice returns, whispering louder each time. You shouldn't be here. Story number 2. I'm not some wild conspiracy guy. I don't wear tinfoil hats or think the government's hiding aliens under Walmart. But what happened to me last summer, I can't explain it. And trust me, I've tried. It was late June, and I was driving from California to Colorado to visit my brother. I'd done the trip a few times before and usually stuck to the main highways, but I had extra time, and I'd heard about Highway 375, what they call the extraterrestrial highway. It cuts through the middle of nowhere in Nevada, and I figured, why not? Maybe I'd see something cool, or at least get a photo with one of those cheesy alien signs. That stretch of road is long, empty, and unsettling in a way that's hard to describe unless you've driven it alone. The desert out there doesn't just feel empty. It feels forgotten, like it's always watching, but no one's watching it back. I was a few hours in, maybe 6 p.m., when I realized my gas was lower than I thought. I wasn't panicked yet, but the needle was hovering around a quarter tank, and I hadn't seen another car in over 40 minutes. No signal either. I remembered hearing about a gas station called Little Alin that was halfway decent, so I kept driving, eyes peeled. That's when I saw it. A small, old-fashioned gas station. One of those tiny one-pump stops with a flickering red and white sign. The letters were worn down, but I could make out something like Roscoe's or Rocks. There were a couple of rusted metal chairs out front, a cooler with glass soda bottles, and what looked like an old red pickup truck parked off to the side. The place looked deserted but functional. I pulled in, relieved. The pump was ancient, definitely not card ready, so I walked inside. The door creaked. A little bell rang overhead. Inside it was dim. Smelled like motor oil and something burnt. The shelves were mostly bare. Some dusty bags of chips, canned beans, and half-used jugs of coolant. A man stood behind the counter, mid-50s, maybe older. Long gray hair pulled back into a ponytail. His eyes were blue. Too blue. Like way too bright for someone with that complexion. He didn't smile, didn't greet me. "You lost?" he asked. His voice was rough, slow, not unfriendly, but off. I shook my head. "Nah, just passing through. Running low on gas. Can I fill up?" He stared at me a second too long, then finally nodded. "Pump works, just cash." "Got it," I said, pulling out my wallet. "How far is the next real town?" He said, "You already passed it," and smiled. But there was no warmth in it. I stepped back outside and filled up. The numbers on the pump ticked slowly like it was counting backward. My tank was almost full when I heard it. Tapping, not on the pump, not on the car. On the window. My rear driver's side window. I turned. No one there. I walked around the car, heart thumping, but I didn't see a soul. The desert was quiet. Sun was starting to dip now, long shadows crawling across the cracked pavement. I went back inside to pay. The man was gone. I looked around the store. "Hello?" No answer, but the cash register drawer was open, empty. Weird. Just then I heard a loud thud from the back of the store. Like something, heavy falling. I froze. "Hey, I just want to pay and go," I called out. Still nothing. I walked toward the back, past a row of shelves. There was a half-open door labeled storage. I pushed it open. It was empty. Not just empty, abandoned. Crumbling drywall, broken glass on the floor, no stock, no lights. The air smelled stale, like something dead. This wasn't a functioning room. It looked like it hadn't been used in decades. I turned and bolted back to the counter. I dropped a 20 on the wood and, left as I stepped outside, something was wrong. The red truck that had been parked beside the station? Gone. But here's the thing, I didn't hear it leave. And out there in the desert, you hear everything. There are no distractions, no cars, no birds, just wind. I got in my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of that lot fast. I drove for another hour before I saw any sign of life. Eventually, I found a small diner and stopped to get food. My hands were still shaking when I walked in. The waitress was sweet, older, seemed local. I figured I'd ask. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. I stopped at a gas station back down the highway. I think it was called Roscoe's, little white shack, old pump out front. She looked at me strange. "You mean Roy's?" "Could have been Roy's," I said. "Guy with long gray hair, real quiet?" Her face shifted. She looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sweetheart, Roy's been closed for over 30 years, she said. "Burned down. The owner died inside. Gas. Line exploded, or so they say. No one set foot on that property since." My stomach dropped. "No, this was today. I got gas there. Pumped it myself." She shook her head. "You're mistaken. Nothing but an empty lot out there now. Locals avoid it." I pulled out my phone to show her my GPS history. Maybe it logged something, but my signal was still dead. The map wouldn't load. "Maybe you got turned around," she said gently. "Lots of weird stuff out there." I barely touched my food, paid in cash, and got back in the car. Back at the hotel that night, I popped the fuel cap to check something. My receipt from the diner was time-stamped only 90 minutes after I supposedly filled up. But my fuel gauge was nearly empty again. Like I'd never pumped gas at all. I barely slept. Just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing it over and over. I checked satellite images the next morning. The spot where I stopped? Nothing. Just sand and weeds. But I swear it was there. I remember the pump. I remember the man's two blue eyes. I remember the knock on my window, and I remember the final thing I saw before I drove away, though I didn't realize what it was until later. In the rearview mirror, on the cracked sign above the door, half covered in vines, were the barely visible words, "See you again." Story number 3. This is something I haven't talked about in years, and even writing it now is making me sweat. I've told people pieces of it, bits that sound like a heat stroke story or a bad trip. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. And no matter how many years pass, I still wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, wondering if it's out there. Still watching. In 2017, I was working on a photo series focused on isolated landscapes, places untouched by humans. Most of my work had been forest-based up to that point, but I wanted something different. So I planned a solo trip to photograph the Sonoran Desert. No trails, no campsites, just my gear, my Jeep, and the endless dunes. I picked a spot about 30 miles from the nearest highway. I mapped it out meticulously, marked coordinates, downloaded offline maps, and packed enough water and food for 4 days. I even had a sat beacon just in case. By day 2, I hadn't seen another human in over 36 hours. I was deep into the dunes, far enough that all sound faded. Even the wind moved quietly there, like it was holding its breath. That night was the first time I saw it. I was camped beside a dry wash, nestled in a small dip in the land. My fire was low. I had just finished shooting the Milky Way when I noticed something strange in the distance. It was a figure, barely visible at first, just a silhouette atop a dune. I thought maybe it was a cactus or a rock formation, but then it moved. It didn't walk. It shifted, like it was gliding forward, not step by step, just drifting, slow and deliberate. I froze. My first instinct was that someone else was out here, maybe a ranger or another traveler. But what kind of person hikes through the desert at night without a flashlight? I stood up and grabbed my headlamp. When I clicked it on and pointed it toward the ridge, the figure was gone. I scanned the area for a solid 10 minutes. Nothing. But I still felt watched. Eventually, I climbed into my tent, locking the zipper like it would do anything if someone really wanted in. I didn't sleep. Every crunch of sand, every shift in the wind had me on edge. The next morning, I told myself it was a trick of the light. I was tired, the stars were bright, and the desert plays tricks on your depth perception. I kept shooting and kept moving. That afternoon, I found something that still makes my blood run cold. Footprints, not mine, not boot prints, bare feet, long, narrow prints that didn't look right. The toes were too far apart and the arch was wrong. Like whoever made them had never worn shoes in their life. They circled around where my tent had been. Close. I followed them for a bit, just to see if I could spot an origin. Point, but they simply ended halfway up a dune. No departure, no drag marks, just vanished. That night I didn't make a fire. I tucked the Jeep under a rock overhang, hoping it would make me harder to spot. I covered the windows and stayed inside, doors locked. Around 2 a.m., I heard tapping. Not knocking, tapping, like a finger on glass. 3 slow taps. Then nothing. Then 3 more. It was on the back window. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Moose, my dog, was with me on this trip. And he didn't growl. He just stared at the back window, ears flat, tail stiff, completely silent. Then the tapping came again. But this time, on the passenger side, tap, tap, tap. I reached for my flashlight and flicked it on, shining it toward the window. Nothing. But there was a handprint, a long, greasy smear of a handprint. Too long to be mine. The fingers stretched nearly to the base of the glass. No fingerprints, just streaks, like they were burned into the condensation. I slept with the flashlight in one hand and a knife in the other. The next morning, I was done. Screw the photos. Screw the isolation. I wanted out. I started the Jeep and turned back toward the way I came, following my saved route. But after 3 hours of driving, something was wrong. I wasn't hitting the landmarks I passed on the way in. The small stone arch, the burned-out saguaro, the dried animal carcass. None of it was there. It was like the desert had shifted, or like I'd been picked up and dropped into a mirror version of it. By late afternoon, I was starting to panic. My GPS was still tracking, but the signal kept flickering in and out. I had water, food, fuel, but none of it mattered if I couldn't find my way out. I crested a ridge and saw it again. The figure, closer this time, just 100 yards out, standing still. Tall, unnaturally tall, maybe 7, 8 feet. No features I could make out, just a black outline against the glowing sand. And even though the wind was blowing past me, the figure's long, dusty cloak didn't move. It was completely still, like it wasn't part of the world around it. I hit the gas, drove right at it, but as soon as I blinked, it was gone. Not behind me, not running, gone. That night I didn't stop. I drove under the stars, bouncing over dunes and rock, until the Jeep's tires nearly shredded on a sharp slope. I had no idea where I was, but I knew I had to keep going. Just before dawn, I spotted something that made me cry with relief. A fence, a rusted, barbed wire cattle fence, the kind ranchers put up to keep livestock from wandering off. I followed it for over an hour until I hit a dirt road, and another hour after that, I hit a paved road, and eventually, civilization. I never finished the photo series. When I got home, I downloaded the memory cards from my camera, and that's when I found something that nearly made me puke. In one of the night shots, taken on the first night before I saw the figure, I was lying on a rock with the stars above. Long exposure, a peaceful shot, but in the corner, at the edge of the frame, something is standing, a silhouette, on the ridge, watching. I didn't see it when I took the photo, but it saw me. And to this day, sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel it. Out there, in the dunes, waiting. Story number 4. I was doing environmental survey work in West Texas about 2 years ago. I've got a background in geology and hydrology, and I work on contracts mapping groundwater risk zones. The job sends me to some of the most remote corners of the desert you can imagine. Places with no signs, no signals, and nothing but dust for miles. This story happened during a 5-day solo survey out in the Chihuahuan Desert. I had a government permit, all my gear, satellite maps, water, everything. The land I was on had been untouched for decades. My job was to dig shallow soil samples every couple miles, log the topography, then move on. The first 2 days were uneventful, unless you count hearing nothing, but went for 48 hours as an event. By the third day, I was deep into the zone, maybe 40 miles from any paved road. That afternoon, a sandstorm started brewing. You know how they say desert storms move fast? They're not kidding. 1 minute, it was calm. The next, the wind was kicking up like it was angry. I could see the horizon going dark, dust rolling toward me like a giant wave. I packed up what I could and took shelter in my 4Runner. Good thing I brought heavy-duty window guards and taped the door seals. I've been caught in storms before, but nothing like this. Visibility went to 0 in under 2 minutes. The sound was unbelievable. Sand and wind hammering the vehicle like a hailstorm from hell. I couldn't see more than a foot outside, even with the headlights on, so I waited. Sat there with a protein bar and a half-warm bottle of Gatorade, thinking it'd blow over in an hour or 2. It lasted 9. Around hour 4, things got weird. It started with the static, my shortwave. Radio crackled to life even though I hadn't turned it on. At first, I thought it was picking up some rogue frequency bouncing through the storm, but the noise was rhythmic, like breathing. It came in waves. Then words. At least I think they were words. A whispering, layered over itself in multiple voices. Male, female, some low like a growl, others soft like a hum, but all saying the same thing, over and over. Don't move. I froze. At first I thought maybe I was just tired. Maybe the white noise was tricking my brain. But the phrase kept repeating like it was being spoken at me, not through a device. I turned off the radio completely. It didn't stop. The voices weren't coming from the speakers. They were outside. I leaned forward slowly, peering through the sand-caked windshield. Nothing but swirling dust. Then something moved. Not a trick of the storm, something tall, dark, and walking against the wind, slowly. I blinked. It was gone. I sat there for probably 20 minutes, heart hammering in my chest, gripping my pocket knife like it would do anything against whatever I was seeing. Then came the knock, 3 slow taps on the driver's side window. I screamed, actually screamed. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the window, dusty and vibrating slightly with the wind. But I heard it. I felt it. I stayed like that for hours. The wind howled on. My water ran low. My head was pounding, and then, around hour 7, the voices returned. But this time, they were clearer. "You've been here before. Why did you leave us? You belong in the sand." I clutched the steering wheel so tight I think I tore skin from my palms. I don't know how to describe the feeling except this. It didn't feel like I was losing my mind. It felt like something ancient was trying to remind me of something I wasn't supposed to remember. Eventually, I passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up, the storm was gone. Just like that. Blue sky. No. Wind everything dead silent again. But the desert looked different. The dunes had changed. The terrain didn't match my GPS. The landmarks I'd noted were gone. It was like I'd been relocated. I drove in what I thought was the right direction for hours. No roads, no tire tracks. Just endless sun and sand. Then I found the footprints. Hundreds of them. Human footprints, all around my vehicle. Some barefoot, others wearing shoes. But none of them mine. They circled the car, zigzagged and strange. Patterns overlapped and disappeared into the dunes. I wasn't hallucinating. I took pictures. I still have them. Eventually, I reconnected with the highway. I didn't report the incident to my contractor. Just filed the data I had and said the storm cut the trip short. Later, back at home, I showed the photos to a professor friend who studies indigenous lore. He went pale when he saw the prints and asked where I'd been. When I told him, he asked me a single question. "Did they talk to you?" I didn't answer. He told me desert tribes in that region have old stories, really old, about the Wakunya, spirits of the wind and sand that whisper to travelers during storms. Some believe they're echoes of the first people lost to the desert. Others say they're not spirits at all, but something far older, buried beneath the sands and always hungry. I don't know what I believe, but I know this. Sometimes when the wind picks up outside my apartment, I swear I can hear them again. Whispers, asking me why I left. Story number 5. This happened in the summer of 2021, and I've only ever told my sister about it. I was on a solo road trip doing the whole find yourself thing after quitting my job and breaking up with my girlfriend. My plan was simple: drive from Phoenix to San Diego with no strict itinerary, camping or crashing in roadside motels as I went. I had just passed through a small desert town, don't even remember the name, and was heading west when I realized I was too exhausted to keep going. I hadn't slept well in days. The sun was setting, and I promised myself I'd stop at the next sign of civilization. About 20 minutes later, I saw a faded neon sign appear in the distance. El Sol Motel, vacancy. It looked like something from the 60s. Pink and orange neon flickering in the dusk, a single-story horseshoe layout with doors facing a cracked parking lot. I almost didn't stop. It had that sketchy, haunted vibe. But I was way too tired to care. I pulled in, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not just rural quiet, dead quiet, no wind, no bugs. Not even the hum of AC units. It was like the world had hit mute. There was an old man at the front desk. His skin looked dry and thin like parchment, and he had these watery gray eyes that didn't blink much. "Room for one?" I asked. He just nodded, handed me a key, an actual key, not a card, and pointed toward room 8. The hallway lights flickered as I passed. My room was near the end. I opened the door, expecting a disaster. But to my surprise, the room was pristine, like too pristine. White sheets perfectly tucked, everything symmetrical, not a speck of dust anywhere. I showered, lay on the bed, and within minutes passed out. Then things got weird. I woke up suddenly. Room was pitch black. I grabbed my phone. Dead. Not just low battery, dead, wouldn't turn on. I sat up, disoriented. Something felt wrong. The air in the room was heavy, stale, like I'd been locked in for days. I got up and opened the door. The hallway was gone. Instead, I was staring into a pitch-black corridor, longer than the building should have allowed. It was damp. I could hear the drip of water echoing. The motel layout was impossible now. The room had somehow shifted. I backed up and closed the door, sat on the bed, and then the TV turned on by itself. It was an old CRT, Static at first, then an image. A live feed of my motel room. I was on the screen, sitting exactly where I was, staring at the TV. But then, something moved behind me on the screen. A figure, tall, thin, blurry, standing in the far corner. I spun around. Nothing there. When I looked back at the TV, it was just static again. I didn't sleep. I waited until dawn, then grabbed my stuff and got the hell out. But here's where it gets truly messed up. When I went to the front desk to check out, the old man was gone. The whole place was empty. Not a soul, not even the car I parked beside the night before. The sign still flickered, but everything felt abandoned. I left the key on the counter and walked outside, and I froze. My car was gone. The entire parking lot was covered in sand, thick layers of it, like it had been years since anyone had driven through. I ran to the road and found only cracked pavement overrun with weeds. My footprints were the only ones in sight. I walked down the road thinking I'd flag someone, but there were no cars, not for hours. Eventually, a passing truck stopped and gave me a ride back toward town. When I asked about the El Sol motel, the guy looked at me like I was insane. El Sol, he said. That place burned down back in '93. Whole wing collapsed. Gas leak. Lot of people died. I insisted. Described the room, the old man, everything. He just shook his head. Later, I looked up the property. He was right. A fire destroyed most of it. The front desk photo they showed in an old article, the same man I talked to. He died in the fire. I can't explain what happened that night. I don't know where I was or what I saw. All I know is my phone was dead when I left. But when I charged it back at my sister's place, the only photo in my camera roll was this. A grainy shot taken from behind me asleep in bed, and in the corner, just barely visible in the shadows, someone watching. Story number 6. I used to work the night shift for a logistics company out of Albuquerque. My job mostly involved driving paperwork or small items between warehouses and remote checkpoints. Boring stuff. One night, I was sent south through New Mexico, near White Sands. I'd driven that route before, and let me tell you, there's something wrong with that part of the desert. Not in a dramatic way, just off. That night, the roads were empty. I didn't pass a single car for almost an hour. The moon was low, barely a sliver. The only light came from my high beams cutting through the dust. That's when I saw her, a girl standing alone on the shoulder of the road. She wore all white, loose dress, white. Boots, even her hair looked almost silver in the glow of my lights. She wasn't waving, wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, staring out across the highway. Now I know what you're thinking. No one in their right mind picks up hitchhikers in the desert at night. But something about her didn't feel threatening. She looked young, early 20s maybe, lost, out of place, like she'd just stepped out of a dream. I slowed down, rolled the window down just enough. "You okay?" I called out. She turned her head, slow and smooth, and nodded once. "Need a ride?" I asked. No response, but she started walking toward the passenger side door. I should have left, but I didn't. She climbed in and closed the door quietly. Didn't say a word. We drove for a few miles in total silence. I tried asking where she was headed. No answer. Just her hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. Her skin was pale and smooth like porcelain. No makeup, no expression. Then about 10 minutes in, she finally spoke. "Do you know where the testing site is?" Her voice was soft, almost mechanical. It didn't match the way she looked. Something about it gave me chills. "What kind of testing?" I asked. She paused. Then, "The one where the lights fall." That gave me pause. "White Sands?" I said. She didn't answer. Just looked out the window. We drove on. And then something strange happened. The radio turned on by itself. I hadn't touched it. It was off the whole ride. The screen stayed blank, but static filled the car. Then came faint voices, like overlapping whispers, saying things too fast to catch. I tried turning it off, but the knob didn't respond. The girl didn't react at all. Then the car lights flickered. Once, twice. I checked the battery gauge, totally fine. Engine was running smooth, but the air felt thick now, like I was driving underwater. Then she said something else. Almost there. Where? I asked. She pointed ahead. I looked, and there was a road I swear hadn't been there seconds ago. Dirt, barely wide enough for the car. No signs, no tracks, but she clearly expected me to turn. I did. The road led us deep into the desert. No lights, no markers. After maybe 15 minutes of tense silence, we crested a hill and saw it. A building. Low, squat, concrete. Like a bunker. No windows. A single red light above the door, blinking slowly. She said, "This is my stop." Before I could respond, she opened the door and stepped out. I watched her walk to the building. She didn't knock. The door opened for her. She slipped inside. Then the light above the door went out, and the building vanished. I mean it. 1 second it was there. The next, it was gone. Not hidden, not distant. Gone. I panicked, slammed the car in reverse, and floored it back down the trail. I hit the main road and kept driving until sunrise. Didn't stop. Didn't breathe right. Just drove. Later that morning, I pulled into a truck stop and tried to explain what happened to a guy behind the counter. Old-timer, local. Just stared at me and said, "You saw the white one." I asked what that meant. He said there's an old local legend. Military wives who lost their husbands during the testing days. Some say their grief kept them trapped. Others say they're not ghosts. They're something else. Messengers, watchers. She shows up when you're close to the line, he said. And if she rides with you, it means you crossed it. Crossed what? He just shook his head. Nobody knows. Later, I checked my car dash cam. The ride was there up to the point I picked her up. Then it cuts. Starts again 57 minutes later. Me back on the highway alone. No sign of her. And the craziest thing? In that missing stretch of footage, there's a single frame, a blurry still shot of something not human sitting in the passenger seat. No face, no eyes, just long white limbs. And a mouth. Smiling. Story number 7. In 2020, I was working on a conservation crew restoring desert trails in southern Utah. Remote stuff. 10-day stints in backcountry with no cell service and barely a whisper of civilization. We were camped near a stretch of red rock and deep sand flats bordering BLM land, maybe 60 miles from the nearest paved road. The land felt old. I don't mean geologically, though it obviously was. I mean it gave off a kind of weight, like the ground itself had memory. There were 4 of us on the crew that week, me, Josh, our supervisor, and 2 newer guys, Eli and Marcus. On day 3, we were clearing a path along a dry arroyo when Marcus's pick struck something solid. Not rock, not metal, something dull, but hollow. He waved us over. We helped dig and eventually unearthed a wooden surface. Decayed and brittle, but unmistakably shaped. A lid, like a crate or small coffin. No hinges, no handles. Just a long box sealed with tar-like residue along the seams. Josh wanted to stop. It's probably a burial. We should call it in. But Marcus was already prying the lid open. Inside was nothing. At least that's what I thought at first, but the bottom was lined with dried curled leather. And on top of that, stones. Dozens of perfectly smooth black stones, each etched with identical carvings. A spiral with a vertical line down the center, like an eye with a slit pupil. We all stared. Then Marcus picked one up and said, "Looks like something you buy at a gift shop." He tossed it toward the arroyo. That was the first mistake. We bagged the rest and took photos. Josh marked the GPS coordinates to report it later. That night, back at base camp, we couldn't stop talking about it, joking about curses, ancient spirits, all that nonsense. But that night was the first time the wind didn't blow. In the desert, the wind always blows. But when I stepped out of my tent to piss at 2 a.m., everything was still, air dead, stars way too clear, and Marcus, gone. I found his tent unzipped, boots missing. Tracks led off toward the arroyo. Josh and I grabbed flashlights and followed. We found Marcus standing alone in the dried creek bed, barefoot, clutching one of those stones. He was whispering something over and over. His eyes didn't blink. "Hey," I yelled, no reaction. When I touched his shoulder, He dropped the stone and gasped like he'd just been underwater. He didn't remember coming out there. Said he'd just closed his eyes for a second, but he was sunburned, cracked lip, dehydrated, like he'd been out there a while. We packed up first thing in the morning. Back in town, Josh called a local ranger contact to report the dig site. A day later, the ranger called back, confused. "There's nothing out there," he said. "Your GPS marks put you in the middle of a sandstone shelf. No arroyo, no box, nothing to dig." We went back. He was right. The creek bed was gone. The land had shifted. Sand covered the area where we swore we'd found the crate. The only clue something had been disturbed was a ring of stones laid in a perfect circle. Each stone had that same spiral carved into it. We didn't speak on the drive back. But that night I had the dream. I was underground, in some kind of tomb. Carvings lined the walls, endless spirals and slits. A low hum pulsed in the air, like wind through bone. And in the center of the room was a figure, tall, bent backward at an unnatural angle. Its limbs too long. Its head was featureless. No eyes, no mouth. But I knew it was watching me. When I woke up, my window was open. And on the sill, one of the black stones. I threw it into the canyon the next morning. A 1 month later, Eli quit the crew and moved out of state. Josh stopped returning calls. Marcus disappeared completely. I sometimes wonder what we really unearthed out there. Not a box, a door, and we didn't open it. We knocked. Story number 8. I'm not going to use my real name for this. In fact, I probably shouldn't be telling this story at all. But it's been years, and I haven't heard a single thing from anyone since it happened. So maybe I got lucky, or maybe they just didn't care. Either way, I need to get it off my chest. Back in 2016, I worked for a private land survey company contracted out by larger government firms. We did basic desert terrain mapping, elevation reports, heat signature logs, seismic checks. Pretty standard stuff, unless you veered off script, which I did. We had a project mapping geological shifts outside the edges of the Nevada test range, miles of scrubland and dunes near Groom Lake. The kind of place you're told very explicitly not to wander off in. But I was young, arrogant, and curious. I'd always heard the stories about Area 51. I figured I'd poke around the fringes after hours and maybe catch something weird on camera. On the third day, I drove out alone after sundown. I wanted to get drone shots of the sunset over the ridge and maybe, just maybe, catch some restricted zone lights or aircraft. The air was dry, the desert calm. I parked by an old rusted fence line with a no trespassing federal property sign half buried in the dirt. I didn't go past it, I swear. But while flying the drone, I saw something strange. A compound. Not a huge base. Just a square structure out in the middle of nothing. Low-profile concrete buildings arranged in a grid. No roads leading to it. No runways, no guard posts. Just a black fence surrounding the whole thing. I only saw it for a few seconds before the drone lost signal and dropped out of the sky. I marked the coordinates and planned to hike out the next morning to retrieve it. I regret that more than anything in my life, it was about a 2-mile hike through flat desert. I left early just after sunrise, took my GPS, extra water, and my radio. But when I got to where the drone should have been, there was no building, nothing, just flat land, not even the fence. I thought maybe I misjudged the coordinates. I walked a wide circle, nothing. But then I found the drone, or what was left of it. The casing was half melted, the lens shattered, and etched onto the side of the battery casing, carved. Like someone used a scalpel, were 2 words, "Go back." I spun around, certain someone was watching me, but the land was empty. I left immediately, walked faster than I ever have back to the truck, convinced someone, or something, was following. Back at base camp, I tried pulling the last bit of footage off the drone's corrupted SD card. It was mostly static and broken frames. But one image was clear, a still shot, low to the ground just before it went down. In the frame, a black door, metal. No, handle. And standing beside it, a figure, human-shaped, but blurred. Not because of motion, because it looked like it didn't fully exist, like it was caught between 2 places. I showed the photo to my supervisor, half joking that we might have found some secret base. He looked at it for 5 seconds, said, "That's not part of our jurisdiction," and deleted the file. Then he pulled me aside. "You didn't see anything. You don't talk about this. Ever. Got it?" I nodded. But that night, I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., someone knocked on my trailer door. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. I opened it instantly. No one there. Just a single item sitting on the ground. My drone's battery. The one with the carving. But the words were gone. Completely smooth. I kept quiet the rest of the contract. Never mentioned it again. But every few months, I get a call from an unknown number. Never a voice, just dead air. Then it hangs up. They say there's nothing out there. But something saw me, and for a few seconds, I saw it too. Story number 9. This isn't a story I like telling. It's not the kind of thing that has clear villains or monsters. It's not flashy. It just happened, and I've never been able to explain it. All I know is that something changed in me that day, and I haven't been the same since. In 2015, I was going through it. Messy divorce, jobless, drinking too much. One weekend, I just got in my truck and started driving with no real plan. Ended up heading south past Yuma toward the borderlands, where the land turns to flat dust and brush, and the sun feels like it's trying to peel you apart. Around noon, I pulled off the road near a washed-out trail to take a break. I'd gone at least 20 minutes without seeing another car. There was nothing out there, not even power lines, just sand, cactus, and silence. That's when I saw the house. It was maybe half a mile from the road, small, crooked, made of sun-bleached wood. No windows, just a front door hanging half off its hinges. No driveway, no fence, no path leading to it. It didn't belong there. I stood by my truck for a while, just staring. Something in my gut said, "Leave it." But my curiosity's always been stronger than my common sense. So I walked toward it. The air got hotter as I approached, like the sun concentrated itself right above that spot. The closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The shadows didn't fall right. The breeze didn't touch me anymore. The birds stopped singing. By the time I reached the porch, I was sweating. Hard, and not just from the heat. The door creaked open when I touched it. Inside was empty. Just a single room. Bare floorboards. No furniture. No graffiti. Just sand. And in the far corner, a chair. A plain wooden chair facing the wall. I don't know why, but I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt pressure in my head. Like I changed altitude suddenly. My ears popped. And the air? It smelled like old wood and wet dust. Like a basement that shouldn't exist in the desert. Took one step in. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun around. Tried the knob. Wouldn't budge. I wasn't panicking yet. Figured it was just warped or stuck from the wind. That's when I noticed something new. There was now a mirror on the opposite wall. Wasn't there before? It was tall, oval-shaped, and old. The glass was warped, like the kind you see in fun houses, but it didn't reflect the room correctly. My reflection was blurry, off-center, and I swear it moved before I did. I backed away. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine, not loud. Just slow, steady inhales and exhales coming from behind me. I turned around, nothing there. But when I looked back at the mirror, there was someone in the reflection, a figure, standing behind me. I spun again, still nothing in the room, but in the mirror, it stepped closer, closer, until it was right behind me even though the space was empty. And then it whispered something. I don't remember what it said. I wish I did. The sound of it made my skin crawl, but the meaning slipped away the moment it was spoken, like trying to recall a dream after waking up. I bolted for the door. This time it opened with ease, like it was never locked at all. I ran, didn't stop until I was back in my truck, breathing like I'd run for miles. The house stood silent behind me, as if it had never changed, as if nothing happened. I drove away without looking back, but the story doesn't end there. For weeks after, I kept seeing reflections that didn't match. In windows, in puddles, in my rearview mirror, always just for a second. A flicker, but I knew it was there. That thing from the mirror, watching, waiting. Then one day I came home and found a chair, an old wooden chair, sitting in the corner of my apartment, facing the wall. I hadn't put it there. No one had a key. I burned it that night, and ever since I've kept every mirror in my place covered. Even now. I don't know what that house was, or how it got there. I checked satellite maps, GPS, data, everything. It's not there. Never was. Just open sand. But sometimes when I'm driving near Yuma again, I swear I see it in the distance. That same crooked house, still waiting, still facing the sun.